From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
A couple of players not practicing, but we will get to that here in a second. I am Chris Clark from Chiefs Digest. He is Ryan Tracy from RGR Football. Your Chiefs practice report real quick. Travis Kelce and Jordan Lucas did not practice because they both have illnesses. That's not really something I'm going to be concerned with a week before the Super Bowl.
No, I'm not too worried about it either. Particularly, Kelce could use a little bit of extra rest with that bruised knee and that kind of thing. So I think if anything, it's a little bit of a bonus to have a day off.
Yeah, and it looks like Chris Jones, I think, was still a limited participant, I think, from what we're seeing so far. But he does say, he did talk to the media, and he did say he's going to be 1,000% ready for the Super Bowl. So I fully think that he'll be a full go. But there's no real reason for him to practice at this time. Get him as well rested and as healthy as you possibly can for the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and he was pretty adamant about being a full participant. So, it's not going to be hunt and peck, see how it goes kind of thing. He should be back to normal, full go. I mean, why not? You got 60 minutes left in your season.
Absolutely. You got to play as much as you possibly can and do whatever you can to try to win that game. And speaking of that type of topic, one of the commentators in the football world, Mike Florio, decided he wanted to make a comment about Patrick Mahomes running. And he decided that it was smart to say that if he was San Francisco, he would consider hitting Patrick Mahomes, even if he started his slide or is getting ready to go out of bounds or is out of bounds. It's worth taking the 15-yard penalty to hit him and tell him he can't run.
First of all, I know you're all fired up. Everybody take a breath. Mike Florio did this to trigger Chiefs fans, and it's working. All he wants to do is be a shock jock from the 90s. It's the same BS as every other time. To say something that grossly inappropriate by prefacing saying, I'm not really trying to say this, but wait, I'm going to say this anyway. It's ridiculous. It is just pure clickbait. Don't let it bother you. Absolutely no one in the NFL listens to the guy anyway, so it's really not a concern.
My bigger issue with this is I understand what you're saying, and I pretty much agree with most of it. My bigger concern with this is that he's sitting here, he's an attorney, he should know better. He is suggesting something that honestly has no real bearing in this game. And honestly, if you look at what we have said in the past about Lamar Jackson, I think that is really what applies here. If the quarterback is a runner, he is free game to hit. And I am all about not taking the, if you want to call it violence out of football, that's really, that's what you want to call it. I'm all about not taking that out of the game. There are going to be hits. Daniel Sorensen's hit on Ryan Tannehill was a clean hit. Mm-hmm. That is a completely different scenario than what he is referring to, trying to say that you're willing to take a 15-yard penalty because you hit Mahomes when he's either in his slide or going out of bounds. I guarantee you they will not be the only ones taking the 15-yard penalty because there are going to be people coming off the bench if he gets hit in the situation like that.
Well, just by saying it that way, and by the way, I agree with you completely about Sorensen's hit, and I put that in the film room on RGR from Thursday. So go check that out if you want to see it up close. But here's the thing. He's actually saying, go get a 15-yard penalty, go commit a foul against the face of the NFL. If I'm Peter King and I work for NBC Sports, I'm appalled and I want the guy fired. I'm telling him to fire him. If I'm Roger Goodell, I'm calling NBC Sports up and saying, this guy's out of his mind and he's putting our star, our pinnacle player for this entire league at risk by even suggesting such a thing.
Well, yeah, and it's dumb. I mean, it's obviously very dumb to even go that direction. But what I have said from the beginning when I first heard that he said this was, Patrick Mahomes, if he's going to run outside the pocket and outside of where he is supposed to be as a quarterback or where you would say he's supposed to be as a quarterback, he's legal to hit, and there is nothing wrong with that. You hit him inside the field of play and you're not trying to take a cheap shot, I get it. I mean, it's football. Accidents happen, and guys generally aren't trying to injure people. But if you're taking a shot at somebody that's trying to slide, that's trying to injure somebody. If he's on the sideline or you can tell he's stepping out of bounds before you launch into him, that's trying to injure somebody. That's outside the lines of the game, and that's why it's a penalty, and that's why you cannot make an inference of that. Don't get me wrong. When it comes to Lamar Jackson, any team that is playing him needs to hit him when he is running the football. I'm not saying dirty. I'm saying you need to hit him. That's how you get them to stop running with the quarterback. That's a completely different situation. And we do need to take a quick break. And when we get back, I want to go into a little bit more of what we talked about yesterday when we're talking about the differences between the Kansas City roster and the San Francisco roster. All right, so we're back, and I really don't want to go over anything we talked about in the previous segment because I just think it's foolish. But when we start looking at this game and looking at these matchups, I had somebody ask me, and I think this is a great idea real quick. Let's go through Kansas City's offensive line versus San Francisco's defensive line. Who has the advantage?
Man, I don't even remember what I said yesterday, but I think tackle-wise, it's a pretty good matchup. I think D Ford's going to get his reps because he still has speed that physically tackles can't, including the Chiefs tackles, can't really get away from. But I do feel the experience level evens it out for the most part. So I'm calling it mostly a push when it comes to the edge rushers. But I feel like the two guys inside, Buckner, Armstead, maybe even Solomon Thomas, depending on who he gets to go against. I'm looking at you, 6'2". I think they have a bit of an advantage on the San Francisco D-line.
Fair enough. Now, if you flip it over to the other side of the ball, Kansas City's defensive line versus San Francisco's offensive line.
That gets a little bit more interesting because it depends on how the Chiefs choose to deploy everybody. I look at the tackles first and foremost every time. And we've seen Frank play on both sides. We've seen Suggs play on both sides. We've seen Tano play on both sides. So it's really, are you going to get McGlinchey on K-Pass? Because I think that's mostly a draw. I think Frank is an advantage. I think certainly Suggs is an advantage over McGlinchey. So whoever you get around, I think that's definitely one matchup that I'm looking at.
Okay, but if you flip it over to the other side when you're looking at Staley, I still think Frank has a advantage over Staley. I'm not sure Suggs does. Mainly because I like what Suggs has done for Kansas City, but at this point in his career, he just isn't clear. He just isn't what he used to be, and that's fine. He's good enough, but I don't think he has an advantage over Staley. I would say that would probably go to Staley, especially, and then you get down to K-Pass. I think that's also a matchup they win. Now, when you start looking at the interior of it, though, Chris Jones against any of their interior guys, I'm taking Chris Jones.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. Laken Tomlinson is a guy I like coming out, but he really hasn't lived up to the billing. He's played a good couple of games, but as a whole, his career path has not gotten there. I don't think that he's formidable necessarily. And on the other side, you got Mike Person. Sound familiar? Yeah, it should. So I feel like that's a matchup that, especially in the run game, I don't feel like you're going to either Noddy, Mike Pinnell, even Saunders. I don't think he's going to move him out of there. It's going to be about pass rushing through that A gap, in my opinion.
Yep. So when you start looking at a little bit of a further depth at this point, you start looking at wide receivers versus corners. We kind of touched on this yesterday, but let's start with the San Francisco wide receivers versus the Kansas City corners.
Okay. I mean, it depends how they align. Now, this is a team that runs a lot of two tight end. So you can't necessarily say they're going to be at 11. They will go to 11. And when they do, I think that plays into the Chiefs' matchups a little bit better because Emmanuel Sanders is savvy. And I think that he has an advantage in terms of short area quickness on Breland. I think he has an experience advantage on Fenton. I think the guy that matches up with him best is Ward, but we know that Ward is up or down, and they have faced each other before. So I think that's mostly a draw. But then you get into the other ones. Deebo Samuel, I think on Fenton, I think physically they can match up, but Deebo's got a little bit better short area quickness and can cut better, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, and then you start looking at what they're going to do with George Kittle. What are they going to do with Tyrann Mathieu on the defensive side? I do think that it's going to be interesting to see how Kansas City decides that they want to align. Are you going to put Tyrann Mathieu in coverage on Sanders or Deebo Samuel, or is he going to be covering Kittle the entire game? Lots of question marks there. It is really going to be how they deploy. So if you expand it really to include safeties and tight ends, at that point, I still think Kansas City is probably in better shape because I think their secondary, with the way they've been playing, they're in much better shape than they would be. At this point, I think that they're better than they were early in the year. I think they have chemistry, and I think that they're playing very well.
Yeah, and that's fair. My question is going to be, who do they bring in to be the speed guy? Who do they bring in to be the change of pace? Is that Kendrick Bourne? Because we've seen him make catches before. Maybe that's something the Chiefs have to be worried about. Certainly, I think it dictates after Kittle, if you do get 11 out there, if you do have somebody that is such a deep threat, it makes it harder to double Kittle, which I expect to be part of the game plan from the get-go. And we saw that doesn't necessarily mean that you can stop him, but it is certainly an approach to getting him contained.
Yep. You don't have to be able to stop him every down. If he is their only weapon and you can slow everybody else down enough, even if he gets and gets 100 yards and gets a touchdown, you're going to be in an okay position at that point. You expand it, though, a little bit further. You go with running backs versus the linebackers and tight ends really against the linebackers as well. I still think Kansas City is going to be in good shape until you start talking about running backs on the linebackers, and then that's going to be an issue that I think San Francisco really can take advantage of. So it'll be interesting to see how they shake that out in the secondary and how Spagnuolo has them covering the running backs coming out of the backfield. If you flip it over to the other side with Kansas City, wide receivers versus corners, tight ends versus linebackers, or tight ends versus safeties, I still think Kansas City has an advantage over their defensive unit.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I don't think that. I mean, what can you do with Tyreek Hill? You can put Sherman on him. Richard Sherman showed you that he'll make plays. Can he run step for step? Devontae Adams got behind him last week, and I think that's significant, especially when you're talking about the speed advantage that Tyreek Hill has even beyond Devontae Adams.
Yep.
But it's about how do they use him? Do they put him back and give him more cushion to eat that up? Because he is such an instinctual player. I think with a 6-7 yard cushion, playing more of a classic cover 3 like he comes from, I think that gives him the advantage there, and it makes it more difficult for Mahomes to squeeze balls into smaller windows, because that's what Sherman does. He makes all the windows smaller.
He does, but the bigger question I have going into that matchup is how are they going to match up? How are they going to use Sherman? Because he hasn't traveled with wide receivers. If all it is you have to have Tyreek Hill on the other side of the field, that's pretty easy to take advantage of. And as long as you're in a situation where him or Hardman are moving at the snap, then you're in a situation where they're not really getting their hands on the wide receiver quickly. That's going to be a problem with as well as Tyreek Hill's been using his feet to get open in routes.
It will. I mean, and honestly, it'll be that same way, I feel, from the slot as well.
Yep.
Now, they've got a couple of guys, including Williams, that plays pretty good in the slot. But whether it's Hill, whether it's Hardman, whether they're switching, we saw them do a really interesting little motion last week where you would have thought that the safety had one guy, but just a 4-foot motion to switch them in terms of outside-inside really let Hill get loose. And I feel like that's something that the Niners are going to be watching for. And either way, both those guys have a speed advantage out of the slot.
Absolutely. And then you start looking at, the running backs coming out of the backfield, catching the ball. I don't think that Darwin Thompson is going to be much in the passing game in this game. I just don't see it, considering how he has done in the passing game lately. Running the ball is a little bit of a different story, but when you start talking about Kansas City and the running backs against their linebackers and maybe even safeties, I think that probably San Francisco is probably going to be in a better situation because Damian Williams hasn't really done a lot catching the ball out of the backfield. He did have a touchdown, catching the ball on almost a wheel route, 2 weeks ago, but that wasn't something that's not going to be a consistent thing Kansas City is really going to use. They're trying to push the ball down to the field, their wide receivers. We haven't even talked about Travis Kelce versus, their linebackers or safeties. Good luck covering him because I don't think they have somebody that can.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to go short, I think Fred Warner's going to draw that coverage in the short to intermediate range. But once you get beyond that, attacking the seams against those safeties, I think, is an apt place to go. So I agree with you. I think that Kelsey's got a nice matchup there, especially if they choose to just rush their 4 and try to go zone. I think that's inviting Kelsey to have a huge day.
Yep, I agree with you. So that's how we see it when we're looking at the different matchups, as positional groups. Obviously we already talked about the quarterbacks. Kansas City has a better option at Patrick Mahomes than Jimmy Garoppolo does. I still think that's going to be a big thing that's going to play into this game, and it'll be interesting to see how Andy Reid uses that. I just want to add one more thing. This is really weird. It's Friday. Football season is still going, and I guess you can call it a Red Friday, but it's not really a Red Friday because there's no game this weekend. Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy your time off. Be ready for the Super Bowl, and we will have a lot of coverage coming your way.
We wanted to get more from Matt Derrick, so we got him to come back and do an extra segment. We're going to go to that when we come back from this break.
All right, Matt. So Ryan and I have kind of already talked about this on our post-game show. One of my most underrated plays in that game was Sammy Watkins catching the ball that was basically at his ear hole when he turned around. What was your most underrated play in that game?
It was a sequence more than anything. A couple of plays. It was on that Titans drive, and it was before what I think is the signature play of that defensive stop, which is Dan Sorensen absolutely draining the soul out of Ryan Tannehill on that scramble and drilling him. But before that, Titans have 2nd and 1. Frank Clark, Mike Pennell, stand up Derrick Henry, stop him short. So now it's 3rd and 1. I personally did not think that Derrick Henry got the first down on 3rd and 1. I mean, had they spotted it, maybe he would have had it. But once again, it was a close call. But you get the penalty on Dennis Kelly that backs him up, and that sets it up. But to me, it was all set up by being able to have that stop on 2nd down, force him into that short situation where then you've got that play that develops, puts him into the longer down in distance. That Dan Sorensen hit was huge because I think it was a wake up call for the Chiefs, and I think it was a signal to the Titans. It was like, okay, this might be the beginning of the end. That doesn't happen if you don't get to stop on 2nd down. And it doesn't happen if you don't get the stop on 3rd down and the Titans commit the holding penalty.
Absolutely. And one thing on that hit, I have to ask, did either of you think that he was going to get penalized for that hit?
We were taught.
The way I saw it originally, I just thought it was, I was swearing there was a penalty flag coming.
I thought there might be just on the just the violence of it. But, and when I saw it live, I didn't think that he lowered the helmet that much. Now on replay, he lowered the helmet a lot more than I thought live.
Yep.
But he hit with the shoulder, and to the officials, that's a difference. It's still lowering the helmet to initiate contact as a penalty, but getting it in their shoulders going to make a difference to the official. And I personally, by the letter of the rule, I don't think it was a penalty.
And I agree with that.
But you're right. I mean, sometimes the violence of a play like that gets a flag anyway.
Yep.
Well, and I'll tell you, the thing about it too is the fact that he was so focused on it. And how I've spoken about Dan over the years, but recently he's been playing at the top of that I've ever seen him. And the fact that he put that shoulder down, you're right, it was not a penalty, but he didn't even know where he was. He was making the play the best way that he could, charging for it. He had to get up and look around to see whether they'd made it or not.
Yeah, and that's you kind of crystallize, that's why Dan Sorensen is Dirty Dan Sorensen. I mean, that play is in a nutshell exactly who he is. And you're right. I mean, he's not going to necessarily know where he is on the field because he's just trying to make a play.
And you got to have players like that. I felt like you're right. That probably set part of the tone. Clearly Frank did. I thought that what we talked about the other day with Frank with the offsides and then Xavier as well, I felt like the D-line was really tuned up and set the tone early. I thought Breland helped. I thought he might have gotten his hands on that particular ball, but I felt like, unlike we've seen a lot in the past, I thought it was the front that really set the tempo for this defense, especially knowing that they had to attack Derrick Henry. Did I miss something, or is this just allowing the secondary kind of take it a little bit easier because they're going to have a tougher matchup this next time?
Yeah, I mean, no, this is going to be a really interesting matchup because the 49ers are a different style of offense than the Chiefs have really seen this season. I don't think that they're a tremendously explosive offense, but they're pretty efficient at what they do. It's the other side of the ball that I think is going to be the most interesting because it's the irresistible force and the unmovable object here, between Patrick Mahomes and that 49ers pass defense. Something's got to give, and so we'll see. But the Chiefs front, especially the last half of the season, and specifically maybe the last month, have just been so strong. I mean, they've been so nasty. They've been setting the edge so well. Terrell Suggs' addition certainly is having, I think, a little bit of an effect on that. But that group, I mean, as a whole, I mean, I think you got to give them a game ball for the way that they played on Sunday because it was a big part of limiting Derrick Henry was just how nasty that front line played.
Well, and you start talking about a guy in Dan Sorensen. He had a big hit on Henry too. Took him out at the legs, and he tackled him by himself. I was very impressed by that play. To me, that was an underrated play on defense. I can't remember the exact down and distance, but he held them short of wherever they were going, trying to get a first down at that point. But this entire defense, the way they played yesterday, the way they got after Henry, and I know we talked about this on Monday's show, 1.37 yards per average after contact for Henry in that game. He was averaging over 4 yards a carry after contact until the Chiefs limited him to 1.37. That's fantastic run defense.
And to Frank Clark's point, with it not being difficult to stop Derrick Henry, the Chiefs put their game plan out there. I mean, they said all week, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go after Henry. We're going to hit him low. We're going to gang tackle. That's all there is to it. And that's exactly what they did. So, like I said, to a degree, what Frank Clark said is absolutely true. I mean, it's not a mystery. They just were able to back up exactly what they said they were going to do.
And it's not a game plan they can necessarily replicate because while the 49ers ran wild against the Packers, it's not the same type of runs. It's not the same type of personnel. So I don't expect to see as much base out there. But to go back to the earlier question, there's one guy that I think was underrated and really stepped out in my mind, not necessarily one particular play because he had a couple of sacks, but the evolution that we're still seeing from Tano Passanio 1 year in this system, 1 year with Spags and Daly. I can't say enough about where he continues to get to. And I think there's still a lot of room for him to improve as well.
There is, absolutely. I mean, the thing with Tano has always been that he's got this freak athleticism. I mean, he's got this tremendous size, but he's got speed. And, you know, the question has always been, you know, does he maybe have the proper mechanics, the skill set, the body to be a true edge rusher? And I think what we're finding now, what the Chiefs have found, is that, you know what, some of that doesn't matter. It's just that if he's that strong and he can be that quick, that he can play anywhere along that line and be useful. And the versatility more than anything is what's really paid off for the Chiefs, because they can put him in any spot on that defensive line in specific situations. I mean, they love moving him inside on passing downs because he's got the quickness to be able to beat some interior linemen. You know, he doesn't always necessarily have the best moves on the outside. He's improving in that, I think. But the pursuit, you saw that. I mean, you know, Ryan Tannehill's a fast guy. I mean, he's got some moves, and Tano did an absolutely fantastic job of chasing him out and catching him on that one play.
Yeah, and keeping him in bounds. That was what impressed me the most about his play that specific play. And then you look at the Frank Clark sack at the very end of the game. The next guy that was going to hit him was Tano. I mean, just relentless pass rush, fantastic. I have to ask you this because, to me, what shocked me about that game plan on Sunday more than anything else on defense was the way Chris Jones was able to play. I did not expect, after him being limited for the not practicing and then being limited, that he was going to be able to do what he did. And he came out and he played very well.
Yeah, and, you know, and Andy Reid ended up speaking about that on Monday, you know, specifically saying that they started out Jones pretty slow, just in specific situations. I mean, I think the first couple of times we saw him was just on some third down passing downs. And then he was feeling good enough. He got into a groove. He wanted to play more, so that they kept him out there. I mean, ended up playing just 28 snaps, which isn't a huge number, but I think it's a little bit more than I thought he might end up being in that 20 to 30 category. So I guess it's on the high end of that. But to play as productively as he did for, I think, those 28 snaps, yeah, I think that's a pretty big deal.
I agree. That's kind of where I felt he would be too. I thought Suggs would be in the same range. He was just a few more. One thing that surprised me is Kendall Fuller didn't play but 55%, 36 total snaps. I think that changes against the Niners just because of the number of weapons and how much they can go to 11 if they want to in terms of personnel packages. We're going to get into those matchups as we come along, but your thought?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, these are two different offenses. You know, I think that they were thinking along the lines that with Derrick Nottie, I think that. Or Derrick Henry. My God. If I mentioned there's...
I would pay to see that. I'm just saying.
No, wait a second. I can't believe you haven't brought up Kelly's touchdown catch.
Kelly's touchdown catch was pretty impressive for a fat guy. I mean, that was pretty impressive.
I resemble that remark.
That was, hey, you know, for all fat guys out there.
You're not tall enough,
for all
Ryan.
fat guys out there, that's what we want. I mean, you know, that's the dream right there.
Ryan, you're not tall enough, though.
Yeah, I heard you the first time. Thanks.
You're welcome.
I'm fullback size. Shut up.
But just to sum up real quick, I mean, I'm really intrigued to see, what the Chiefs end up doing against the 49ers, because it's a different style of offense. And I tell you what, I asked Andy Reid on Monday about the fact that, that the 49ers play so much 21 personnel. They play that so more than any other team in the league. And he kind of had a twinkle in his eyes talking about that. So I asked him, about some of the hallmarks of it, and he didn't want to talk about a whole lot, because I think he and Steve Spagnuolo are going to have some ideas about how to stop that.
I have to say real quick, I say this a little bit tongue in cheek, but what do you both think about the fact that Patrick Mahomes is now in back-to-back weeks forced a defensive coordinator into retirement?
Well, it does help when you are facing defensive coordinators of a certain age, but
that's true.
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable. I mean,
especially with what Pease was able to do. I was a little surprised by that, I have to say.
That happened. I feel like it has happened a few years ago with Kansas, when Kansas
Folks, we have a great guest for you coming on Monday, as well as a full week as this team gets ready for the Super Bowl. Hope you have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next time.
Ouch.
Isaac, just let it be.
Yeah, in your dreams.
And lessons. Let's go. We'll have a special edition in the off season, folks, all about KU football.
And Ryan will be talking by himself because nobody cares about KU football.
I will come on to laugh and trash talk as much as you want.
Nice. All right, Mizzou fans. Matt will be your representative. And Chris, someday.
Nope.
Anything else, Matt? Your big takeaway after talking with everyone, the fallout from seeing how they're trying to move on. How do you feel about where they're at?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a group that's going to flip the switch pretty quickly. We'll find out later in the week that this is not going to be a bye week for the Chiefs. I mean, they're going to do some practices. You will hear from the team throughout the week. So it's going to be a little bit different, but I think you're going to see that this team, like I said, flipping the switch pretty quickly, moving on to the 49ers and trying to put this behind them, because I think celebration for them ended midnight Sunday and they're ready to move on.
Or as Andy Reid said, a cheeseburger and going to bed.
That's a fantastic way to go to bed, if you ask me. I got home and I had a bowl of chili about midnight, after doing some work and then getting ready to do some more work before going to bed. So I had chili and went to bed.
Well done. We'll get back to you with tomorrow with some more. We have some major guests coming for you. Make sure you're listening for those. And we will be getting ready for those 49ers. We'll get Matt back maybe for a pregame. Appreciate your time today, Matt.
Absolutely, Ryan. Chris, thanks a lot.
Ryan Tracy is the founder of Rogue Analytics and the host of RGR Football on YouTube. Follow him there. Chris Clark is a senior analyst at ChiefsDigest.com, where you can get his work. Rate and review at Apple Podcasts and subscribe on your preferred